Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm going to stop that for now, but just want to double check.
Right. Well, thank you all for joining. We're going to get started here in just a second. We've got a wonderful session today about avoiding tech landmines. So avoiding common issues that we see, unfortunately, way too often, and want to help webmasters and folks who are managing websites be in the best possible position. So our support director, Jake Petoskey, is going to be speaking about that in just a few minutes. For those who are not familiar with us, we are Corner Shop Creative. We are a digital marketing agency that supports nonprofits in a variety of areas online. Specifically, we design and build websites. We provide a lot of hosting, maintenance, and support, which Jake leads for our team here. And then we also do digital marketing activities such as Google Ad Grant Management, SEO and GEO optimization, and other email marketing and tools out there to help you get more exposure. So talk with anybody who may not be familiar with you. So feel free to reach out to us at hello@cornershopcreative.com, and we're happy to continue the conversation. If folks have any questions, we're always happy to respond offline as well. So please feel free to email us after this presentation if you have any questions. We are happy to get to any of your questions. There is a chat feature and a Q&A feature in the tool here, so feel free to post in there, and we'll chime in with those at the end as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jake to get us started here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ira. Hello, everyone. So glad you joined us today. I am really excited to present this to you all. It'll be an interesting one. I'm not going to say that any of this is too deep or too technical or too difficult to understand. I think these are really some good foundational things. And even if you do a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today, I think it's a great opportunity to refresh, double check that you're following these practices, and of course, letting me know about any things that you're questioning about your own security practices and the landmines you might run into. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, here we go. All right, so these are the simple operational habits that prevent tech chaos, and sometimes very expensive tech chaos at that. Just a quick about me here. I started my career in support at Salsa Labs, still around, still kicking, and that's where I met Ira, who introduced me. I did a lot of training and learning management over there at Salsa Labs, just really focused on best practices in advocacy and fundraising campaigns. I've done a lot of nonprofit work myself. I've worked on digital campaigns, communications at the National Democratic Institute, Texas Freedom Network, Phoenix Talent School District in Southern Oregon, and the Ashland Food Co-op. I started at Corner Shop Creative in 2021 as the support specialist, and now I'm the director of support, managing over 275 clients, 277 if you count my parents who get to enjoy my free tech support. I hope a lot of you are nodding along at home going, yep, that's me too. Free tech support is never a bad thing. So I want to preface by saying this isn't actually a tech talk. This is very much not a tech talk. This is a operations and processes talk. Now, what does that mean? I didn't mean to trick you. I'm not trying to switch anything up on here, but I'm just pointing out that a lot of the issues that we're talking about today are not so much solved through technology or through any specific apps or anything like that. That's certainly part of it, but this is truly about operations, how you run your organization, and the processes that go on within your organization. And we'll talk a little bit why that is. So I kind of want to start with an example here. This is actually based on, I've got a couple of real world examples here. I'm not going to name names at all, but it's never just one thing. I do a lot of outdoor activities, and people will always say, if you have some epic, something go wrong in the outdoors, usually it's not just one thing. You know, it's not just that you got hit by a snowstorm. It's that you also forgot your jacket. You forgot to check the weather before you went out. You know, there's multiple things that tend to stack up that lead to things. So here's an example of that. So say an employee left the organization. That happens. You have people who leave, they move on to other things. But in this case, the admin account that they had for your website wasn't disabled or removed. Okay, not a terrible thing in and of itself, but again, these things stack up. Then we find that the employee reused passwords in multiple places. Okay. It's not the best practice to reuse passwords, but it happens. They didn't differentiate them. This is the problem. They weren't splitting up passwords among multiple platforms. Then it turns out there is no two-factor authentication on the account. And that would have been our final line of defense in this particular instance. And what happened is that the site got hacked. So this is a very simplified example, but it is a real world example. This is something that absolutely happened. We've seen this happen, unfortunately, with a couple of clients. Again, an employee left, they had admin access. That same employee had reused the same password in other places. And as we know, sometimes password leaks happen, big data leaks happen, and that's when passwords get exposed. And nefarious individuals out there go out and grab that list of passwords and they try to attach it to a name or an email address. And then they just go out looking to see, okay, where can we use the same email and same password elsewhere to try to gain access to a different system. And if you don't have two-factor authentication, there's that final line of defense where the individual would get an email or a text message that says, hey, did you authorize this login? Hey, use this code to finish your login. But without that extra step, that hacked password, that exposed password is used to gain unauthorized access. So again, it's never just one thing. It's kind of a stack of items that pile up. So I'm going to start here. No one wants a zombie apocalypse, but in this case, we're talking about a zombie employee apocalypse, building on this example that I just shared. You'll have to excuse my terrible hacking up of this meme, but hopefully you get a small laugh out of it. Heartbreaking, the most trusted person you know at your organization just had terrible security practices. So my point being here, you could be amazing at your job and do so many things right and just be so trusted and so valued at your organization. But if you don't have good security practices, all of that could be for naught. So the person who you never thought would become a zombie, again, it's that trusted employee who maybe reused passwords and never really set up 2FA for their key passwords. You might also have some shared admin accounts that were never used. Again, this is something that we see from time to time. A big one is that there's no regular access review. Now, some systems out there will require this. I've seen different CRMs require, frequent password resets, at least annually, things like that. But it's really, really important just to make sure internally that you're checking to see, hey, who has access? Are these the right people who have access? Are there people who have access right now who should have had that revoked sometime in the past? This is a really, really important part of your operations. Again, this is operations and processes less than it is a tech solution. So here's a really good question that you can kind of take back, start thinking about right now. If you had to, could you list all your admin accounts today? And that means, if I think about everyone that works with me at Corner Shop, could I think of everyone who should have access versus maybe a few people who shouldn't have access? Granted, we have, close to 40 folks here at Corner Shop these days. So I would take a while to list all of them, but I could certainly let you know, yes, these are the people who should, these are the people who shouldn't have access. And that's not just maybe for your website, but for all your services. If you've got a CRM, can you list and make sure that you know who all your admins are there? Any of those critical platforms, if you're using QuickBooks or you're using accounting software, any of those really mission critical tools where if access was lost or if access was compromised, there could be a really, really expensive recovery process. Those are the ones you need to be thinking about. So could you list all those admin accounts today if you had to think about it? So I mentioned 2FA. I brought this up a lot, and a lot of folks may not know what 2FA really means. So 2FA stands for two-factor authentication. You'll also sometimes see this spoken of as multi-factor authentication. There may be other phrases out there as well. And two-factor, basically, it utilizes multiple platforms to prevent that unauthorized access. So instead of just a login and a password, it also uses, so you're logging into WordPress, say, you've got your username and your password. So there's that one, but a 2FA will typically send either an SMS or text. That's one option, or it might use an authenticator app to provide what we call a one-time password, usually a 30-second long password that gets reset every 30 seconds. Or it might use a push notification that goes to your phone requires you to open an app. I know Gmail has this these days where if you log in on a new computer, it might pop up on your phone and say, hey, was this you? Can you authorize this access? And some of the password managers these days also use pass keys that also have a bit of a built-in authentication there. So the whole idea is instead of only having that one login page on your WordPress admin, it's also going to utilize a different platform, an unattached platform, again, SMS, email, authenticator app, to confirm that that is an attempted login. And so there's that two-factor or the multi-factor authentication. This is a really, really important part. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you have it on some of your accounts because there are many services out there that require it, that are adamant about it. But this is one of those key takeaways is you yourself as a nonprofit professional need to make sure that you're enforcing 2FA. Even if it's optional, it's always a good idea. It's always, always, always a good idea. I'm going to show you a quick example. This is over on our private intranet. We have a number of, this is a private site, so there's not as much exposure here. We actually have a two-factor authenticated two-factor status for our employees. You'll see we have a few employees where it is inactive. And again, that's because this is a private intranet. This is by design. But if this were a public-facing website, if this were something where we did have really mission-critical information, I would go back to all my coworkers and say, hey, Andy, hey, Amanda, you all need to activate your two-factor. So that's just something really important to take a look at, just making sure that you all have that implemented for, again, those really mission-critical type of platforms. So that's your WordPress site, your CRMs, things like that, where if they were to go down, if they were to get hacked, how would you recover? It would be pretty costly. So let's think about 2FA going forward. I also want to point out, this is really, really, really important. If you ever reuse passwords, which again, best practices, you shouldn't. Each login should have a different password, but we all do it. I'm guilty myself, so I'm not going to claim that I'm perfect, but that's where 2FA, again, is just one little extra layer and is highly, highly important. So I want to talk about another landmine here. This is one that we see quite a bit as well, and this is around domain ownership. In particular, I'm talking about your organization's domain, at our company, cornershopcreative.com. It could be any number of other platforms as well, but truly this is the one that this is your digital presence on the web, right? This is very, very important. Before I get into this, I actually have another example from a recent client where, unfortunately, a lot of notifications about an impending domain renewal were missed. They were going to kind of a black hole inbox that someone wasn't checking. And unfortunately, they lost a domain. The renewal warnings were missed. And then after those renewal warnings were missed, there's usually about a 30-day grace period when a domain actually expires that the domain registrar will not sell that, will not auction it off, things like that. Unfortunately, those 30 days passed as well. And so at that point, the domain went to auction. Someone bought it. Just as a heads up, there are lots of people out there doing data brokering, and they will sit there and look at domains that are expiring, and they will scoop them up in an instant if they are high value domains. So in this case, what should have just been a $10, $20 renewal for their domain, because they missed all those notifications, is now in a situation where that domain is being auctioned with a starting price of $4,000. So that became a bit of a costly mistake. So I wanted to lead with that anecdote there, but let's talk a little bit more about some of the other landmines of domain ownership. So the big one that I always start with is, do you even own your domain? And this is really important. Again, in the same way that you own a house, your domain should be owned by you. You live there, and this is where your organization lives on the internet, is your domain. So it's really, really important to make sure that you own your domain. That's a real big philosophy here at Corner Shop, that we do not want to own your things. We do not want to gatekeep your own properties. So really want to make sure that you own this, because ultimately that will put you in the position to make sure that it's safe, that it's renewed, and that you can maintain access to it. One thing I've seen a lot, unfortunately, is that some other agencies and some other groups will often have their agency purchase the domain on their behalf. And so everything is going through that other agency. And so if you ever have a breakup, whether it's a good breakup or a bad breakup, it becomes a little bit tricky because that becomes a new item that you have to manage, negotiate as part of that, that split in the relationship, making sure that that domain ownership then gets transferred over to you. So I would really recommend skip that step. Make sure that you own your domain. Make sure that it's in an account that you all have access to, and hopefully that multiple people have access to. We'll get to that in a second. So say you own your domain. Great, you've confirmed, we've got access. I see it there in my GoDaddy account or my Network Solutions account or Namecheap, whichever domain registrar you use. But like I mentioned before, oops, the expiration and renewal notices are going to inactive inboxes of former employees. So this is one I see a lot, and this applies across the board. Anytime you're signing up for a service that is really mission critical, again, imperative to your organization existing on the web, do everything you can to attach that account to a non-personal account. So that might be info at or team at, could be anything, data at, or even just logins at, doesn't really matter, but make that a email address that is accessible by multiple people. And when you share that password with multiple people, again, we want to make sure that that's behind a 2FA, and we want to make sure that's saved in a secure space. We'll talk a little bit more about password practices in a little bit. But this is one I've seen multiple times happen where, John Smith registered the domain. John Smith left the organization 2 years ago, and the domain renewal is coming up. It was a 2-year domain renewal, and it's coming up. And so all those renewal emails are going to John Smith's old inbox. They're bouncing. GoDaddy doesn't care that the emails are bouncing. They're not going to let you know, hey, by the way, we keep getting bounces on this. You might want to check that inbox. They're not going to worry about that at all. On top of that, if it's attached to an old email address or an inactive email address, if you've got 2-factor on there, you're going to have a hard time logging in. If you have to do a password reset, you're going to have a hard time logging in. So this is really, really important. Again, I highly recommend attaching your really critical logins to specific employee email or specific non-employee email addresses. So team addresses, shared addresses. Okay, great. So you've confirmed you own your domain. You confirm your email renewals or your renewal emails are going to an active employee. But the employee got terribly sick on the big day of your hosting migration. No one can access the account. This has also happened before. I've seen this one pop up from time to time. So in this case, the employee is active. They would be receiving the 2FA code, or they would be receiving the renewal email, but the big day comes, that person's not available, and now you're kind of stuck because you haven't shared that access. So that's going back to what I said about using a non-personal email address where you can. So just a few fixes, which I've already mentioned a little bit. Make sure you own that domain. If you don't, ask your agency, ask your managing partner about plans to get those under your ownership. Again, it's just really, really important to make sure that you have that ownership. It is yours. Don't let someone else hold you hostage. I have heard from a few clients of ex-agencies that they worked with where it was a bit of a nasty breakup, and they've been concerned about how do we get access back to those things that we had that agency buy on our behalf. So where you can, the best way to do it is buy it on your own, make sure you own it, and then share or delegate out access to that domain or to that service to your managing agency. That's one way to make sure that you avoid this particular landmine. Like I said, make sure your logins for your domain registrar or any other mission critical accounts use a non-personal account. Here's just some examples: info at, team at, IT at. A lot of folks use Google Workspace these days to set up emails. There's ways to set those up so that everyone gets copied on emails that come into that particular inbox and gets shared across. We do the same thing here at Corner Shop, where you can go in and see all of the 2-factor requests that have come through. So when something gets triggered from GoDaddy or something like that, we go to the same account and we can all share that access. Again, we've got 2FA on that, and we also have that shared in our password manager. So yeah, I would say this is where, again, it's process and operations, making sure that when you're onboarding an individual, making sure that they know that this is the policy. We do not sign up for critical services with our own personal email addresses. And when I say personal, I'm saying your email addresses at your organization. Even worse if they're signing up for these really critical services using their actual personal email. jakepetoskey@gmail.com, that makes things even more difficult, because if at least their personal email was on your business domain or your organization domain, at least then you typically have access where a super admin for that particular account can go in, look at that inbox, or again, if it's an abandoned inbox, you can usually set that up to forward to an active employee. But if it's at someone's personal email, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever the heck it is, that's where things can get really tricky. I've also seen this happen where we've had clients who have been trying to regain that access, and it's signed up on someone's personal Gmail. And for whatever reason, I don't ask for the drama or don't ask for the tea, but that organization sometimes is a little bit hesitant or just knows that they're not going to get a response from that former employee. So that's really something important to check out. The last thing, particularly around domain renewals, sign up for those auto renewals. Make sure that you don't even have to actively do anything when your domain is about to expire. So make sure you're signed up for auto renewals. But the extra there is you need to make sure that you do check your payment options when new cards are issued, because I've seen this one bite people too, where yes, your domain was set up on auto renewal. It should just be set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it. But sometime in that 2-year span or even 1-year span, a credit card expires, a new credit card is issued. And so the domain registrar is sitting there trying to charge a non-existent card. And if you, going back to the first, second, third points, if those renewal emails or those error emails, hey, we couldn't process this charge, are going to a personal email, they may not see that. So taking all these things into account should lead to a little bit more security around your domain renewals, and making sure that you own your domain, making sure that any kind of renewals or issues with the account are going to a full team address rather than a personal address. And then also making sure that you're signing up for auto renewals, but making sure that you're updating your payments and your payment options when new cards are issued. So here's another landmine. This is what I call the single point of failure partner. No surprise, these are all real world examples. I didn't have to make anything up here to provide you some key examples of how things can go sideways. So this is a hypothetical here. Say you partnered with a company who are experts in their field. That's great. You're getting the help you need. And you said, hey, we're going to go external for this. We're going to find a new company to help us out with this particular aspect of our digital presence. So that's wonderful. Thing is, despite that fancy name that they have, turns out they're actually just a one-person shop. It's one person. They created their LLC and they've got a fancy name now. They've got business. That's great for them. That's great for you. But it's just a one-person shop. So just like our sick employee in our previous example, if we can't get in touch with that one single partner and it's an urgent issue, and that partner organization or partner company does not have a backup, or they don't have a team or other process to support them, we're kind of hamstrung. So I've seen this happen exactly. There was a site that was planned to be launched and everyone was ready to do it. The last thing that needed to happen was flip some DNS switches, DNS telling folks where the website is located as far as hosting goes. And we find out the day of the launch that the one individual who had access to that DNS was not available. They were out of pocket and nothing could be done. Tried everything, emailed, put urgent in the subject line, tried to call them. This person was just completely out of pocket. And so in that case, we just had to delay. We just had to wait for that person to become available again. So it may sound minor, but this is an example of the things that you need to think through when you're partnering with other organizations, when you're sharing access to things, especially mission critical aspects. So again, in this case, that DNS change was blocked, waiting for one external manager. There's no backup contact. There's no escalation option. So it became quite a difficult situation where the corner shop team was ready, the client team was ready, but this one other partner was not ready, was not available. And so we all had to shift our entire schedule accordingly. So a few fixes here. One, many heads are better than one. So when considering new partnerships with other agencies, other organizations, ask yourself, do they have an urgent escalation process? And who can you contact on their team? Here at Corner Shop, we have that. If you send us an email to our support team and it has an urgent in the subject line, we get immediate notifications in Slack during business hours. outside of business hours, multiple people are texted. So there are backup processes in place to make sure that there is no one point of failure, and make sure that the responsibility is spread across multiple people. So even if I get terrible food poisoning tonight and tomorrow morning, I'm not even strong enough to get up and text Ira and say, Ira, I can't make it in today. Ira knows where to find everything. Ira knows how to pick things back up. Ira knows that all of my passwords are going to be saved in our password manager, that none of the passwords are going to go straight to my email address. So all those elements are add up to make sure that there's a good escalation process. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're hiring on external organizations or external companies. Just ask, do you have an urgent escalation process? What should we do if there's an emergency? Who can we talk to? What do you all do on your side when there's an emergency? Also ask if they are a one-person shop. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of experts, and they are experts solo. That's fine. But do ask yourself, can you afford with this particular one-person shop? Can you afford not being able to get in touch with this partner for same-day request? It may be one thing if you've hired an outside designer and the designer is not available on one day or doesn't get back to you, but they get back to you the next day or later in the week, probably not the biggest deal. But again, if you're planning a site launch or you're planning on a new campaign rolling out and that designer is going to be needed the day of the campaign, maybe you're waiting for a court case to be ruled on and you're waiting to say, okay, we've either got a pro message or a negative message. What's it going to be? That's where you need to make sure, okay, are we reliant on just one person here, or are there other people that we can go to in times of need? And then also, what are their policies around shared access? So again, this kind of goes back to the ownership aspect of domains. You want to make sure that they are able to share access to some of those services, because that might be a potential backup too, that you're able to say, okay, you know what, in case you're not available, is there a way that our team can log into that service that they're using, that we can go in and make necessary changes if needed? We'd rather the expert do it, but just in case, if there's something that we need to do, can we access the system that external agency is using? So again, just a few things to keep in mind as we expand our team, as we expand the multiple partners that are involved with our organization. We have to consider, how do they fit in? What are their policies? Do their policies around access, security, et cetera, do those line up with ours? Because if they don't, that might be a red flag, or at least a yellow flag, to think, okay, well, they don't seem to really prioritize security or prioritize urgency around requests. So that might be something that we consider when making a final choice. So I've got another landmine here. This is what I call invisible infrastructure. So this is one where, again, we are all guilty of this. We've run into this here at Corner Shop. I don't want to pretend like this is something that only happens to a few people. It happens to a lot of us, but we lean on our senior staff. We have folks here at Corner Shop that have been here for 10 years, and I am sure that they know things that I don't know. I'm sure there are things that we rely on them for multiple ways that is really just living inside their head. So they've got that extensive historical knowledge. They've got additional context. This is why we used to do things this way, or this is why we still do things this way. And let me explain to you, let me tell you a story of how we started down this path. But these are the type of people who just know where things are. You can just go to them and say, hey, can you tell me about what was going on with this project, or what was happening at this time, and why we decided to go with GoDaddy over Namecheap, or why we set up our hosting this way? There are those people that just have that information. Sometimes this might even be the executive director themselves. I've seen that happen. Sometimes it's your IT person. It can even trickle down to an intern that you hired over the summer. They put together a really cool project. You all still use it. You're like, yeah, that was a great use of an intern. Well, the problem becomes you don't have a list of your services or your systems. And so if that particular employee were to leave, or they were just temporarily unavailable, you know that in a typical situation, you'd go exactly to that person. You'd say, hey, can you tell me where this thing is? Or can you remind me of why we did this way? But if that person's unavailable, then where do we turn to? What do we have? So making sure we've got a list of services and systems is one really great way to make sure that we avoid this. It also makes it harder to diagnose failures. Again, if we don't have this documented, if we don't know exactly where to turn to, then we're going to have a really hard time figuring out what how do we address this failure? How do we make sure that we correct what's happening right now? The other part is that nobody knows where everything lives. If my senior staff over here, who's been here for 7 years, knows where service A, B, and C live, and then my other senior staff member over here knows where services C, D, E, and F live, then we start to get this incongruous, incomplete picture where we've got some information over here, some information over here, but again, it's living in someone's head. It's not listed out anywhere. We don't have a clear picture of where all those items are. So there's some fixes for this invisible infrastructure. I would say with anything, the weakest link is always the human or human error. So one big thing is it's easy to forget to add things to your password manager. And we just need to make a habit of documenting these things. So again, this is really part of your policy that you set out from the get-go. How are we making sure that we list whenever we sign up for a new service, where does that go? I would recommend password managers. These can serve as de facto infrastructure lists. If you've created a new service, if you've signed up for a new service, automatically adding that into a password manager or making sure that that is part of your process, add that to a password manager, is going to give you a pretty complete list of all the services that your organization uses. So that can kind of serve as your de facto infrastructure list. Highly recommended. I do want to have a little side note here on password managers. They're really, really helpful. And one of our senior developers reminded me, he said, hey, any password manager is better than no password manager. So keep that in mind, because again, reusing passwords is one of our landmines here. But we want to be careful of overlapping. So maybe you use an organization-wide password manager, such as 1Password, Bitwarden, things like that. But then your individual employees are also using their Google Chrome password manager, or they're using their Apple password manager that spans across their laptop and their phone. Now we have two different systems where we need to make sure is the password manager of record, our 1Password account, is that getting updated? Or are we now concerned that our employee is saving really, really important mission critical services to their personal Google Chrome password manager or their personal Apple password manager? Because now you've kind of opened up a separate vector for potential compromise. So that's one thing to really keep in mind. Again, any password manager, better than no password manager, but just make sure that you have a clear policy for your staff of, hey, we do not save organization logins. We do not save any logins that are specific to your company, your organization. We do not save those on our Google Chrome or our Apple passwords. We keep those all in 1Password or Bitwarden or things like that. So one way to also address this invisible infrastructure, kick this off with a simple meeting of staff. And I hope this presentation at the end of this, I hope it does inspire you to just have a quick conversation with your staff. This does not need to be a big undertaking, but it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do on a regular basis, once a year. Hey, we're in our down period right now. Let's do a quick inventory of all of our logins, all of our services that we're using, and let's make sure we're all on the same page. So we're trying to figure out, where is everything? What do we have? What do we use? We use Google Workspace. We use, this particular CRM. We use Every Action. We use Salesforce. So let's get this all listed out. Make sure we all know what we're using. The other question is, who owns this? Who's the person that actually owns this particular service? So this is going back to our previous conversation. Does our agency own our hosting? That might be the case. In a lot of cases, Corner Shop, we share all of our volume pricing discounts with our clients through our hosting. So in this case, we would tell our clients, hey, we own your hosting, but it is your site. You have access, and we'll share that access. But it's important to note who owns this, because again, going back to our single point of failure example, we want to make sure we know exactly who owns it. So if something comes up, we know how to access it. Where is it managed? So this is not just where in terms of like a website. Is this on GoDaddy? Is this on Namecheap? Is this somewhere else? But also, where is it managed internally? So who has responsibility for it? Do you have it in your password manager? And then who is making sure that that particular service is being maintained, is being updated, that old employees are being removed, new employees are being added. Make sure you know kind of who has that ownership over that particular service. Really important question for each of the items that you list out. Could someone else find it tomorrow if we needed it? Or not just find it, could someone else access it tomorrow if we needed it? So this is answering that urgency question. If something urgent, an emergency pops up, could we get the access that we needed, or would we be stuck trying to find it, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for someone to reply back to our request? So this is an important one because, again, we need to figure this out in terms of our priorities of our services. How important is this? Is it a big deal if we don't have immediate access to it? Then in that same meeting, take a walk through your nonprofit ecosystem. These are just some of the items that I would recommend, kind of a jumping off point. Obviously, domain and DNS. Sometimes these are separate. DNS is basically your phone book for the internet. If you're trying to find web traffic, you'll find that here. If you're trying to send emails, you'll find that through Google Workspace, that sort of thing. So sometimes DNS management is elsewhere. A lot of folks these days are using Cloudflare for DNS management, but you still have your domain registrar where the actual domain lives. So make sure that you've got access to those. Those are highly, highly important. Again, that's your home on the web. If you don't have access to your domain and your DNS, then it all kind of falls apart. Your general website and hosting, in Cornershop's instance, we love using the host platform Kinsta, but there's WP Engine, there's DreamHost, there's all those other ones. Again, if it's something that your team needs access to in terms of files on the site, that's where hosting access comes in. If you're working with an agency like Cornershop and you need that access, ask your agency, hey, can we get access there? We do provide access to our clients. There's a few things that we have to caveat because once you have hosting access, you can do a lot to bring down a website. But again, not trying to gatekeep, just trying to make sure that everything is safe and secure. And if it's your website itself, you're logged into your WordPress site, making sure that we all know who should have access, where does that live, how do you log in, all those questions. Check for your CRM, donation tools. If you use an advocacy platform, a fundraising platform, make sure you list that out, make sure you know who has access, where those things live. Obviously, these days, email, social, brand platforms, these are all really, really important to make sure that your site remains visible, that your digital presence is there. And we want to make sure that these also don't get compromised. I've seen clients as well lose access to their social that maybe has been out for 5, 10, 15 years. There's a big audience and they lose that access. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to get a hold of Facebook Meta support. It's effectively non-existent. I belong to several listservs where people will say, I'm in an emergency. Does anyone know how to get in contact with someone at Facebook? Because we need to regain access that we lost. So really, really important that you make sure that your social platforms are really at a higher priority as well, since that's a big part of our digital presence these days. And then, of course, look at your supporting tools. This is where things can get a little bit hazier, a little bit harder to pin down. But your Google Analytics platform, if you use an events platform like Eventbrite or things like that, if you have other integrations that you use on your website, some things like HubSpot, those types of platforms, making sure that you keep those listed and inventoried as well. Those are going to be really important. Really, above all, this goes back to my original point. This is not a tech talk. This is a operations and process talk. You really want to create that culture of security and safety. So a few things that go into that. These are just a little bit, some add-ons here at the end. Credentials sent through email or chat or plain text is a big no-no. Again, we're all guilty of it. Don't beat yourself up if you do it, but really try to create that new habit, that new culture of security, that we use something like Quick Forget. This is one that we use a lot here. Quickforget.com allows you to share that sensitive information. You can set a certain number of views before that is expired or a certain time period before that expired. So I could say, I could send someone a link that says you get 2 views or it expires in 24 hours. So it kind of really minimizes the amount of opportunities for that, that confidential information to be compromised. If you use Google Workspace within Gmail, there is actually a confidential mode. This does much of the same thing. It really just makes sure that the information that's being shared is shared in a secure manner, and also it's not there in perpetuity. So yes, all of us from time to time send a password in Slack, send a password in a Google Meet or something like that. And, we're going to just turn a blind eye to that for a second. But in general, we really want to make sure that we're sending these secure elements in a secure manner as well. I mentioned this briefly before, really, if you can build this culture of security, make sure on an annual basis, perhaps, that you're reviewing your access. And it may be important too, depending on how many people are accessing things, to require password changes on a regular basis. Some services allow you to enable this where it forces it on people. Hey, every 365 days, require a password reset. I'm sure you all have run into it in other services that use on the web. Requiring unique passwords for each service. Again, we really want to avoid reusing passwords because that's where things get a little bit nastier. And again, use a password manager for anything and everything work-related. Okay, work-related. I think it is important to make sure that you're doing personal stuff. You can save that somewhere else, but save your work stuff to your work password manager. Again, this is not gospel. Do not save things to your browser or OS password manager. There are instances where that does make sense. Again, any password manager is better than no password manager. The one thing I love about a password manager is that it will cook up those crazy long passwords that include a special character and a number and everything else that they require these days. That's why I like a password manager. But because it creates unique passwords. But again, we just need to make sure that we're using it to begin with. Anything's going to be better than nothing in those cases. So here's your bare minimum. We want to make sure we enable 2FA on critical services. Really, best practice, enable it on everything. Yeah, you have to go to your phone, grab that code, enter it. It adds a few seconds to logging in, but it is so helpful. It is really that last line of defense. Use a password manager. Anything's better than nothing. But again, make sure that you're really making a choice. Don't tell your staff, hey, go out there. You can use your Google Chrome password manager or use your Mac password manager. We'll put most of the stuff in Bitwarden. No, if you're using Bitwarden, put everything in Bitwarden. Make sure that it's understood that that is the expectation. Have your offboarding process. Make sure that you know when someone is offboarded. What are we doing with their email? What are we doing with any services that they used to log into? So on the WordPress side, we can remove a role from an account. We can also delete an account, but that's really important to do. Make sure that that's happening. Again, in the example I used at the beginning, if they had simply deleted their former employee that no longer was with the organization, their site never would have been hacked to begin with. So it's always multiple things, not just one. But also don't forget onboarding. Again, setting this culture, setting these expectations, setting the processes and policies around how you implement security and your security practices really sets the stage for that employee's entire time at your organization. So don't forget about how important this is on the onboarding side as well. So yeah, we want to know how to resend access. We want to be able to disable logins and passwords. And one thing I'd really recommend, don't shut that account down, especially if it's an email account. Set up forwarding, make sure that, any mission critical stuff gets sent over. I actually ran into this pretty recently. A few client contacts apparently left fairly suddenly. When I emailed them, all I got was a bounce back. Those email addresses were simply shut down rather than being forwarded on. They could have set up an autoresponder that said, hey, these employees are no longer with this organization. Please contact so-and-so instead. There wasn't anything like that. So kind of hit a dead end pretty quickly. So make sure set up forwarding rather than just outright deleting where it makes sense. Again, centralize ownership of all your services. Make sure they're all in one place. Make sure you know where they live. Make sure you know who owns them and who's responsible for them. Maintain that inventory. This is just going to make your annual check even easier. It's going to make sure that when we add new services, we know where those are. And again, your password manager can act as a de facto inventory for a lot of those services. That's it. I talked a lot. We've still got 15 minutes, so I'm hoping that I'm going to go check and see that there's a bunch of questions and things that I can go into more detail on. But yeah.
We got a few questions, and I have some answers in, but I'm sure you can answer as well. But the first one that came in is from Jordan, who asked, what 2FA plugin would we recommend for a WordPress site?
Yeah, for WordPress site, again, I love 1Password. That's what we use here at Corner Shop. the one I will talk a little bit of trash of is LastPass. I don't know if you all caught this, but this was a few years ago. LastPass, a password manager, they were compromised. There was a data leak on their side. Not a good look for a password management company. But I do like 1Password. It includes one-time passwords included in it. So most of the time when you set up 2FA, you'll see a little QR code, and 1Password lets you scan that QR code from within the app, and that will pick up that one-time password, and then it's in there immediately. And the cool thing about 1Password is, like, once you log in, it'll autofill your username, your password. You get to the next step where you enter the 2FA, and it'll also autofill that 2FA code. So highly recommend that one. Depending on kind of how your systems are set up, maybe you already have some existing systems and you're not going to be making a transition to 1Password or something else like that. The Google Authenticator app, available on all the app stores. That one works great. Microsoft Authenticator app as well. Those are probably the two main ones. I think there's also Authy, AUTHY. Those are three of kind of like the big players in one-time password creation or 2FA clients. Yeah.
Yeah, and so those are for saving the passcodes that you can create. I think this question was actually more asking about setting up that two-factor authentication for users on there. And I think we tend to use just the built-in features within WordFence, which is the overall security plugin that we use. I do know that there are dozens of others out there, including like Jetpack has it built in, which is very popular with bundled with many sites. There's a standalone 2FA plugin that we've used, the two-factor authentication via email. I can post the link here in the chat. I know we've used that one as well, but any others, Jake, or anything else?
I'll just echo your recommendation for WordFence. It's just wordfence.com. That one is really fantastic just because it's not just a two-factor setup. It also does a lot of other login security. So if someone happens to want to try to hack into your site, it has limits. It can do rate limiting. So if it sees that someone continually is trying to log into your site, it'll just automatically block them. That's really nice. It also scans for vulnerabilities with plugins on your site. It does a lot. It's a really full-featured system, and it's completely free. So it's been a lifesaver for us in a lot of different ways. Highly recommend WordFence.
I like the grace period that it gives you as well, so that when you're setting up a new account, it doesn't like block them immediately, and that just makes it for a much easier onboarding process. And then once they're in your system, then they have the 2FA set up. So
absolutely.
The other question we had in here is, how can we support or get training for less tech-savvy users to not make errors or commingle the organization's systems and their personal systems? So how do you avoid that commingling of stuff with personal and professional?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this one. This makes me think.
I can chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I'll chime in with my favorite approach with this, which is really using Google Chrome and defining to start encourage everyone to use Google Chrome. And they have a great feature that lets you set up different profiles in your browser, and so that you can set it up so that you have. I set it up so I have my professional one, I have my personal one, I have a couple other email addresses that I log in with over various places, and so those different profiles are all in there, so that when I'm logged in as my professional, everything that's created is getting done under my Corner Shop email address. And so to me, that is the approach, is using some system like that almost forces you to say, okay, everything is isolated here. And we can provide that training, but I encourage you to provide that training to your staff, of making sure of, like, when you're onboarding them, as Jake was talking about, is saying, hey, we use Chrome for this. This is why. Make sure you set up your profile, show that they because you can bypass that startup screen where you choose the profiles. So make sure that they aren't bypassing it. Things like that happen in onboarding, I think is the best one, at least for browser and saving stuff in there. Other tools, I think it can be a challenge sometimes with that. And I don't know, Jake, if you've had any other ideas or thoughts.
No, I was just going to echo a lot of what you already said. One concept you introduced me to was the concept of shadow IT. And that is, here is our tech stack at our organization. We use 1Password, we use Google Chrome with a specific work profile, et cetera, et cetera. But then you come to find out, oh, well, someone actually prefers to use Firefox for their own personal reasons. And so they're using Firefox for most of their things. They also happen to be using Firefox's password manager, and also, et cetera, that you get the idea. They're using services that are kind of outside of those applications or those tools that you all have kind of approved or pre-approved as these are our official tech stack. So I do think I really agree with Ira on the profiles. That is the nice thing about Chrome. You can set up different profiles. So I've got my work one. I have a different profile set up for our shared access, so I can kind of log into our main accounts to go look at shared analytics and things like that. But then I also have just a personal Chrome profile, so that's where I can go check on my quick email. I guess the most strict option, which I think is probably the harder to enforce, would be, but this is the policy, and it helps kind of CYA a little bit, is, hey, you've got a work laptop or a work computer, you do work on that laptop, you do work on that computer. If you're doing personal things, that's on your personal computer, that's on your phone, that is on a completely different system. Now, there's only so much guardrailing you can do to enforce that, but it's not a bad policy to put in place, because again, it's just a bit of CYA. If it were to come out that, oh, someone was saving their organization passwords on their personal Chrome profile, and then that got hacked somehow, and those passwords leaked, you do have that policy to fall back on and say, hey, you were never supposed to be using that particular personal device or that personal profile on your work computer. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but it is good just in terms of kind of, again, that CYA aspect of things. But in general, just making sure that people don't have these errors. I think mentorship is a great way to do things. Find that champion for security, find that champion of good security practices, and have them help your less tech savvy employees to help them get set up. It can be a bit onerous. It can be a bit of a hurdle to clear. But once it's all set up, it all doesn't take as much to reiterate or iterate on it and say, okay, we've got a new service. Do you remember how to set up that 2FA? All right, no problem. Here, let me walk you through that. And once you walk them through that, they tend to pick back up on how it works.
Yeah, I really like to reiterate that last point about the getting champions to support this work. That it's not all just on you, or in your role. That you can leverage people who maybe are more tech savvy or are more security conscious, and have them encouraging the rest of the team. Or if they notice things, say, hey, do this, and having those reminders. We do that internally around AI, as we're all working to adopt it and manipulate it. The folks who've naturally adopted it more and are a bit further along are helping out and encouraging and supporting those individuals who haven't had as much time to invest in it. And so that's always a great strategy for helping those less technical folks.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that one is just, again, use tech guardrails where they exist. We mentioned with WordFence, you can set a grace period. So you can basically say, hey, you have to set up 2FA in the next 10 days or 15 days, whatever it is, or you will be locked out. And so there are options like that to make sure it has to happen. You're going to have to anticipate that less tech savvy employee coming to you and saying, I got locked out. I don't know how to get back on the website. And then someone's going to have to teach them, oh, this is because you didn't set 2FA. Let's do that right now. But there are certain ways, at least you're protecting yourself a little bit more. So if someone's not just slipping by, oh, we asked everybody to set 2FA, and 8 out of 10 people did, but those 2 people didn't, whatever, we're just going to let them ride. You can also look into these guardrails that might help better force them into good security practices.
Yeah. Our last question with our last couple minutes here. Somebody asked if we have any recommendations or know of any templates that clearly consolidate when people need to create or store this inventory. I think thinking more of like that, where is the domain registered? Like, where do we store this and how do we organize it so future people and everybody in the team knows where all that information is?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to speak a little bit to kind of how we do things here at Corner Shop. It's going to be different for everybody. We, as I mentioned, are a Google Workspace organization. So one thing, there's nothing wrong with storing this information in a Google Doc or spreadsheet. what I like about Google Docs is that you can put in certain security limitations. So perhaps only senior staff should be able to access this particular document. You can set up those permission levels, so that way it doesn't kind of just drift off into the wrong hands. On some of the nonprofit boards I've been a part of, I've seen this happen where, hey, we've got a Google Doc that stores all of our logins and all of our passwords right there, so anyone can log in. Because they're not really security oriented or security minded, they don't know that if I grabbed the link to that doc and shared it with anybody, anybody could access it. So definitely consider putting in some limitations there if you're using Google Docs. Again, there's nothing wrong with using a Google Doc or spreadsheet to list those things out. But the thing I would tell you is don't put the password in that doc or in that spreadsheet, because again, even with Google Docs, like it's pretty easy to just say, make a copy of this, and then there's a copy floating off in someone else's workspace, and you have no way to keep track of that. So, list your particular services, list the login name if you feel so inclined, but I would instead include a link to your 1Password instance for that particular service, or otherwise put a note about where to find that password, but don't put that password in that same document. In terms of templates, it's a really great idea. I don't know of any off the top of my head. We use one here at Corner Shop when we have new clients join us that kind of list all these things. It's a big exhaustive list. It lists all the domain registrars. It lists all the different hosting platforms and basically says, do you use this one? If so, note your login here. So Jen, I'll send that to you and see if that might be helpful, a jumping off point for you. But otherwise, that's a great question. Might be something that that would be good for our team to develop.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that, but yeah, I'm not familiar with any templates out there. I think of, it's funny with this. It's almost that bus scenario of, obviously you don't want any of your employees to get hit by a bus, but in the extreme situation they did, what's going to happen when they're gone? And so for us, it's just having that quick overview of, this is the essential information folks need to know about Corner Shop if something horribly tragic happened. So, so yeah, I think the tool itself is, as long as it's secure, is not as important as just making sure there's some place that other people are aware of where all this technological data is stored. So.
My closing note is just, I left my email there. Please reach out to me. Like, you're not bothering me. I like this job. I like helping people. Like I said, my parents get free tech support. Anybody who knows me gets free tech support. So there's always limits on my time. I do have a job, but I'm really here to help out. So please, if you have any questions or just a thought that might have occurred after this webinar, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. And I know the thing said last point, Pam, obviously a lot of this focused on Google and our experience. Certainly a lot of these same tools exist in Microsoft and other providers. So if you have any specific questions or any scenarios, we'd love to answer those offline. Again, email Jake directly or us at hello@Cornershop Creative. If you're a support client, we have our support@cornershopcreative.com. And Amanda posted a link in the chat, in the Q&A, for a quick survey. We would love any feedback you have about this. We hope this was useful. We're going to be emailing out a recording of this, and any questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Jake, for this great information, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, y'all.